to the Bayview Podcast with hosts Andrew Clark and Chris Emery. This is designed to be a discussion on all things life and faith. We hope this serves as a weekly resource and encouragement to you.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Bayview Podcast. My name is Andrew, one of your hosts, and joined, as always, by Chris Emery. How are you?
Hello. I'm good, man. I'm doing really good. So it's a Tuesday as when we're filming or recording this, and we just finished just kind of a good staff time today.
Mm-hmm.
We do staff meetings on Tuesday. We had a really good lunch from Slabtown Burgers right here in Traverse City. So Slabtown, if you're listening, we'll give you props for burgers, so big time.
Little sponsorship.
Put a little Slabtown burger right here on the table or sweet potato fries every single week. I don't know. No, it's good. It's a good day. We're filling out March Madness brackets.
Yep.
Which that'll be fun.
Be good for. It's always good staff bonding. I feel
Yeah.
like over March Madness, and this time of year is just a fun. I don't know. Means better days. Sunnier days are coming when March Madness starts happening.
It does mean that.
We'll take it.
I would love to tell you that it'll just be fun for me, but I'm not gonna lie. Like it's competitive. It's something competitive.
You want to win.
I have
you
to
and
win.
My wife.
I want to win.
Yep.
Yeah. But here's the thing. Here's the weird dynamic is that I know that your wife is as competitive as I am.
Yep.
And so now it's really like it's Nicole versus the rest of the bracket. Like I want to beat Nicole.
Yeah.
I'm almost fine if I don't win. And she humiliated me on the pickleball court a couple weeks ago. And
It's better to accept defeat before it happens from her, because that way when you do win, you feel like Hoosiers, remember the Titans, the 1984 hockey team for USA. You just feel.
So you're saying
amazing.
I'm the United States and your wife is like Russia? She's the Soviet Union of old.
I didn't say that, but you know what I mean.
Nicole, if you're listening, neither one of us are saying that. I promise we're not saying that. So anyway, hey, it's good to have you with us here today, as it is each and every week. And we love this time together, as we hope that the podcast is just kind of a moment of encouragement, resource, as we just have these dialogues and conversations. And so today we have a guest, and just so excited to have him with us. And I'm going to butcher your last name. I can't. It's Andy Miedema?
It's Miedema.
Miedema. See, I knew that you've told me before, and I can't get the timing right. Miedema.
That's
All right.
okay. There's plenty of people who spell it different and people who say it different.
Okay.
So I don't even know that I'm saying it correctly.
Somewhere you have a relative listening like, that's not how we say it.
Probably.
Man. So Andy is here. He is the CFO of the Great Lakes region, which is the region that we are part of as part of the denomination of the Wesleyan Church. So if you're listening, you may not know that, but we are part of the Wesleyan denomination, just a great, awesome denomination that we are proud to be a part of. And so Andy has had a relationship with Bayview for a little over a year now. We started kind of connecting. You've been a huge resource of help, of coaching at a lot of different areas for us. And today you came up to hang out with the staff. You paid for the Slabtown, so that's a big win.
Yep.
It was my first experience. It was fantastic.
There you go. And hey, Slabtown, I hope. Just saying. Anyway, but Andy, man, we're so glad to have you here. Just tell us, kind of the big overview. Who are you? What do you do as you sit right now?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me on. So as Chris said, I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Great Lakes region, which means I run all the finances for the region, which covers the states of Michigan, Illinois, and Wisconsin. So there's about 180 Wesleyan churches in those three states that we have the privilege and honor to support and to love on. In my job, I take care of all the financial accounting stuff for the district. I run all of our IT, HR, operational stuff. But then the other half of my job is interacting with churches and supporting and helping them with all their operational financial needs. And so that's one of the reasons I've connected with Bayview is how can we help? How can we support? How can we resource you guys to live out your mission? So, and that's part of the job that I love the most is using the connections that I have and the resources that I get connected to bring those to churches and allow them to serve the mission. So, that's my role right now.
Very cool. And you live in Grand Rapids?
That's right. I live in Grand Rapids with my wife, and I have 3 boys who are 6, 8, and 10.
Wow.
My wife homeschools them, so I got 2 hours away from that today. But they're fantastic, and it's great. We belong to a great church down there, and I'm from the Grand Rapids area, so
very cool.
Yeah, glad to be here.
And you go to Frontline Church, or
that's right?
Okay,
yep.
Frontline. Yep.
I go to a church called Frontline. It's about 20 years old. It was a church plant out of another church around the Grand Rapids area, and when I'm there, I actually serve on the board, and I'm the treasurer there. So in addition to serving at the region, I also serve my local church in that capacity.
Very cool. Very cool. I love that. And so how long have you been at the GLR, the Great Lakes Region office?
Yeah, so I started about 4 years ago, just over 4 years ago.
Okay.
That's right.
That's awesome, man. Well, so you and I have spent a little bit of time together, enough to know that this is not what you've been doing your entire
Right.
life. This is kind of like a second chapter or a third chapter. I don't know. So maybe kind of give us that journey. That's kind of
Sure.
the stories we enjoy hearing is, people's Jesus journeys, people's journey, especially when it's individuals that have come from a totally different career, and then God pulls them out of that and puts them into a ministry, vocational ministry particularly.
Yeah.
It's just a really cool transition, but usually the story is filled with a lot of great things that as you look back on, there's lessons, there's growth, there's doubts, I don't know. So tell us a little bit of how did God get you to where you are along the way?
Yeah, thanks for asking. That's an awesome story. So, I grew up in Grand Rapids. My wife and I were both blessed to grow up in Christian homes. Our families were in the church for generations, and so we're just really blessed to be part of the church our entire life. I grew up in church. I went to Christian schools and grew up in just a wonderful Christian home. But as I entered into adult life, I felt the calling to go into what we call the marketplace or the business world. And so after I graduated with college with a business degree, I went to work for a local community bank in Grand Rapids. And that was an awesome experience. I got to work with small and medium-sized businesses and on their financing needs. Most of them were family-owned businesses, and so just a great community of businesses. One of the things I learned is, in Michigan, we're really blessed to have so many wonderful business owners who care about their employees, who care about the communities, and I got to work with them for 16 years of my career. And it was a lot of fun. It was a great organization. It was a growing bank, and it was filled with just wonderful people who I'm still friends with today. Many of them are also Christ followers. So I had that career, and God gave me a blessing in that career, and I was able to move forward. I kind of ended that career as a senior vice president in that bank in charge of corporate lending, and that was a really fruitful career where I met a lot of wonderful people. But after about 13 or 14 years in that career, I started to feel God's call to something else, even though I didn't know what it was. And I didn't know what to do with that because I had a good career, a good job. It took care of my family really well, but I didn't know what God was calling me to next. But that's when I really got plugged into my church more deeply. I started attending Frontline when that happened, and inevitably when they found out that I had a career in banking, I got invited to be on the finance team, which always happens when you're part of an organization and they find out that you know something about numbers. And that turned out to be a great experience. I became the treasurer of the church a few years later, which is also kind of an interesting story. So I was leading the finance committee, and they said, well, would you be the leader of the finance committee? And I said, sure, I can lead a finance meeting. So I had an interview with our pastor, and then I found out, well, also you're going to be on the board. And I didn't know that was part of it. So then I went to the first board meeting, and they're explaining to me how the positions of the board work. And there's the pastor leads the board, and then the number 2 person on the board is the vice chair. Mm-hmm. And then they said, well, the number 3 person in authority is the treasurer. And so I said, well, I just got this job, and if the pastor and the vice chair are in a car accident together, I'm now running the church.
You're the boss.
I'm the boss. So, but that actually worked out great. Our church is wonderful, and I got to lead our church through kind of maturing and growing our financial side, which is an awesome gift. And one of the things that I just really felt honored by was just being invited to do that. I can't sing, I can't preach, I'm not going to serve the Lord in that way, but God has given me some gifts that I would love to find a way to serve in his kingdom. And this was the avenue that God gave me to serve in the local church. And so I just felt honored to be invited into doing that. And I feel like there's so many people in the church who have those amazing gifts that are in the marketplace that would just love to be invited to use their gifts into the kingdom. So I'm always encouraging our pastors to invite people to do that, because it's an honor to be asked.
Very much so. Very cool. So you're doing all that. You're serving at your church.
Mm-hmm.
How did you make that transition then from the banking world to the Great Lakes region?
Yeah. So the person who held this position that I'm in now, the CFO position, he was retiring, and my pastor was aware that this role was opening up, and so he recommended that I look at this, and so I saw the job, and I was like, this looks like a perfect fit. It's funny. I was talking to my wife. I remember a few months before that, and I told her, you know what I'd really like to be? I'd like to be a CFO. And I didn't know how I was going to do that. I don't have an accounting degree. I haven't been a CFO before, but this job opened up, and it was just like a perfect fit for what my experience had been. So I met our district superintendent, Chris Conrad, and I started in January 2020, 2 months before the COVID pandemic hit.
Oh, perfect timing. You've never done this job before.
Exactly.
You don't have any background in it, and we're going to have you do this right now.
Exactly. But, that also turned out to be a God story, because, the pandemic hit, and one of the first things that came out is, churches were eligible, all businesses were eligible for what's called a PPP loan, which is this big government money. And so all of our churches, there's about 180 churches, all needed to apply with their bank to receive these funds. And I had just spent 16 years in the corporate banking world. I knew how to navigate the corporate world. Wow. So God had placed me there just at the right time, so that when all these churches needed help navigating the banking industry, I was there with that experience. I mean, I spent 2 months essentially being a 1-800 number for our churches to help them navigate with their banks how to get this money and just navigate the banking system. So that was just God's perfect timing in that story.
Wow. Yeah, that's super cool.
It's like you wish he had a plan. Like he had an idea what was going on.
If God only saw what was coming. No, that's actually a really cool highlight, because one, I do remember during that time, it all was so new. Like, obviously, none of us knew anything about how to navigate a pandemic. And then things like the PPP loan came out, and there was, at the local church government level, there was a lot of curiosity / mistrust of it. Like, well, as it should. Again, totally unfamiliar to us. And I remember a lot of our board members like, well, let's not sign up for something we're gonna have to pay back. Like, we don't want to expose ourselves financially. Like, but one thing that helped so much was one of the early emails you sent out, and you sent out this incredibly great summarization of what this is, why it's good, why we should, and that was such a big peace-giving thing that you offered, that resource that really did put us at complete comfort at pursuing that, taking advantage of the monies that were offered up to get us through that, and it allowed us to continue to obviously pay our staff while things were shut down, keep all of our employees, to where they still had finances coming in during that very, very challenging time. So thank you right out of the gate for that. And God's timing was something crazy.
That's incredible.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, it's like he knows what's coming.
Yeah. And yet we still shake our head like, wow, that's amazing. God's like, I keep doing this for you. What is wrong with you, Chris? What is wrong with you? Like, how many times? Yep. How has that been for you then? Obviously we all know what it's like to, we all know the ministry, whatever role we play, but what you do is 100% full-time vocational ministry.
Yeah.
And although there are certainly plenty of fruits from it, there's all these things that we just, almost privileges, and we sometimes call them the get-tos. There's so many things we get to do. But then there's the other side of it. How's that transition been for you? What maybe some of the more, has there been some difficult moments where it's like making that shift from a banking world into a ministry world? How have you found that transition being for you? Yeah.
So the work side of it has been natural, because it was all stuff that I knew how to do. One significant difference is working in the district office. I interact with all people who, for the most part, are already saved. They already know Christ. In the marketplace, I had a great opportunity where I would meet a ton of people who did not know Jesus, and that just created an opportunity for those conversations. So, the marketplace is really unique in the fact that, you just get to touch people who probably would never walk into church on their own. It's just an amazing gift. And obviously the majority of people who sit in the pews are marketplace people. And that's where you get to go out and encounter the world and bring Jesus to the world. So, that's a part of the job that, to be honest, I miss, because most of the people I interact with are pastors or people who are on staff at churches. So the marketplace is just a wonderful place to bring Jesus, and it's a real privilege to share Jesus with people who need to hear about his love.
Yeah, very much. Marketplace ministry is actually kind of I don't say a hot button topic, but it seems that it's becoming a more common phrase, and I'm hearing more and more. Not that the concept is new by any stretch.
Right.
I mean, Paul was a tent maker.
Right.
So there's marketplace ministry right there for you. But it is something that's becoming maybe more intentionally spoken about and discussed. And I would agree, the majority of our people, in fact, if you're not a vocational ministry worker of some level on staff at a church or a ministry organization, and you have a job, you are therefore by default marketplace ministry. Right. That's the basic definition. If you are saved and you have a job, I don't care if it's in a bank or if it's at Walmart. I don't care if you're down south at the Piggly Wiggly. That's marketplace ministry. If you don't know what the Piggly Wiggly is, watch Driving Miss Daisy and you'll figure it out. Anyway, so I kind of have two sides of a question. First one would be this. Tell us a little bit, what are some tips maybe about marketplace ministry? Some ways for people that are listening to be like, hey, I want to do that, but I don't want to isolate myself. I don't want to polarize myself. I don't want to go in there and get on the table of the break room and tell everybody they're going to hell. But what are some great maybe ways or tips that you discovered? This is how to utilize marketplace ministry and those relationships in a way to point people to Jesus.
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. So I think the first thing is to be praying about it, and to ask God to give you opportunities or to open your eyes to opportunities. Once you're looking for it, you'll start to see opportunities, because God will give you an opportunity to share your faith with somebody. But for me, it was praying about it. There's certainly plenty of people that I would like to share, but you're right. Sometimes you have to have the right circumstance to present it. You can't get on the coffee table at work and start pronouncing things. So one is just asking God and praying for God, what opportunities can you present? Can you open my eyes? And then what I found is that when people have big life events, those are moments when they're more open to hearing things than they would otherwise. So you think about if they have the birth of a child, if they have a major transition in their life, if they have somebody who dies, those times I've found they're more willing to have personal conversations, and they're more open and receptive if you offer to pray for them. So that's one soft way of going to somebody who may not be a believer, is in a time when they might be more open to having those kind of conversations about offering to pray for them. And that at least just puts it out on the table that they understand you're a person of faith, that you're praying for them. And I found that's a non-threatening way to start to have those conversations, is to look for opportunities when they might be more open to accepting prayer for themselves.
That is actually super, super good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So
yeah, it just reminds me of, it's just good to hear, like it's cool to hear that you viewed the marketplace like that initially, just because that call to make disciples is not just for full-time ministers. Like that call to make disciples is for all believers. And so to have that mentality of an awareness, like just the idea of you don't have to know what to say per se, or you don't have to get up and be loud, but just having the awareness of, I'm called to do this, and is there this opportunity, and then just being confident in Christ of taking the step, even if it is just to offer a prayer, I think is really valuable.
I agree. I think that's just a super cool. I mean, it sounds so overly simple, but it's powerful. And I love that idea of like looking for the natural opportunities. But along with that, then it also means that in order to know those big life events, you've had to have built a relationship.
Right.
And I think that that's one thing that's so key is that, Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself, love the Lord your God. Those are the two biggest ones. And so, are we doing a good job of loving my coworkers who are far from God? And I think the church people, I guess I would say, they tend to shy away from that because they think that loving someone equates to agreeing with them or condoning them. That's not the case at all. Jesus doesn't even do that. But he loved everybody first. He loved Zacchaeus first. He loved, Levi first. He loved the woman at the well first. I mean, he knew these stories. Now, he was the Son of God. He had a little cheat sheet that we don't have. But I think that in order to know the natural on-ramps, we got to know their life a little bit. And I think there's this relationship building, agenda that we should have wherever God places us. And maybe you're in a place right now, and I assume there are many that are in a place where it's not where you want to be. You're praying for a change. You don't know why a change isn't coming. Maybe instead of asking all those questions, maybe it's just stop and say, okay, God, open my eyes to the opportunities. You have me here for a reason. You have me here for a purpose.
That's right.
And our purpose is the same, like you said, Andrew, without a doubt. All right, so that's one side of the question. Other side then, and this would be probably less to the marketplace people, but more to people that are in our shoes and maybe other people that find themselves living more in the Christian bubble. Have you found an avenue, or what steps do you take to be more intentional about putting yourself in the place where you're going to engage with people that don't know God? Because we could live in this bubble, and it's a safe little bubble. I could come to work every day, come to church every Sunday. I could easily arrange my life. We all could, to where I never have to engage with people that don't know Jesus already.
Yeah.
But that is not what we're called to do. So how have you worked that out?
Yeah. So a word that God has given me, kind of I would say a lifetime missional word, is the word neighbor. And so when my wife and I got married, we initially, bought a house together. It was in a kind of a conventional subdivision. And I'm pretty sure that everyone in that subdivision went to church or was adjacent to church. And after a few years, we just felt called to do something different. So we actually moved out of kind of our subdivision and moved into a downtown area. I live in Grand Rapids, so it was more of a downtown area. Very small lots. The houses are right next to each other, and there are lots of unsaved people around my neighborhood. In fact, the vast majority of my neighbors don't go to church. So, we have our neighbors on one side, their house is 20 feet away. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of issues with that house. We've had to call the police on it. There's been domestic violence, kind of things. The neighbor behind us doesn't know Jesus. The neighbor across the road doesn't know Jesus. So for us, we decided to intentionally plant our family in a environment where we could be surrounded by people who are lost and see what lost looks like. And just to be around them and invite them into our house, invite them over to our backyard, to be able to say hi to them, to get to know them. For us, that was important. And it was really important for our kids. Yeah. We wanted to get our kids kind of out of that bubble environment and into an environment where they saw kind of the mission field up close and personal. So for us, being located in a place where we're surrounded by people that we have an opportunity to share Jesus with is really important. And through those, God's brought people to us. We've formed relationships. We've invited people to church. We've taken kids around the neighborhood to our kids programming at our church and introduced them to the gospel. So for us, that neighbor word, that neighborhood, and being part of a community where we can bring Jesus has just been an important value for our family. That
is a super cool intentionality. Was that something you and your wife felt together? Did one of you have to sell the other on it more? How was that transition? Because that's a big shift, because you're really, when you're in the big comfortable traditional neighborhoods, it's kind of that American dream, white picket fence existence where it's safe, and we might go to that other mire every once in a while. It might be the sketchiest thing we do. Yeah. To really move into a place where it is a mission field, it may not feel as easy as it is. How was that for you as a family?
Yeah, so initially we thought this is the kind of place that we're going to want to be. Everyone else in the neighborhood looks like us. They're kind of, upper middle class families with young kids, and we just thought, this will be a great for our family. But we just never gelled with our neighbors. It just never fit like us. It just felt like all the other neighbors were kind of on this unspoken keeping up with the Joneses competition that we had no interest in. And we saw the values that were important to those families just not being consistent with our values. And for us, we just kind of both felt this sense of desolation, like this isn't the right place for our family. And now there are plenty of very good families that live in there. There's nothing wrong with that neighborhood, but for us, we just felt called to a different area. And this neighborhood felt like a much, much better fit for us.
That is super cool. How have you seen some of that play out? So you've got, obviously, have to call the police on some neighbors, but I mean, what are some of the ways you've seen God now utilize that through the relationships you're building?
Yeah, so in a small neighborhood where all the houses are close together, you just see your neighbors all the time. And so it just allows for a lot more conversation. In our old neighborhood, everyone had a huge yard and you could kind of, be an island unto yourself. Whereas for us, we're interacting with our neighbors much more often. I mean, you always see each other because your houses are 20 feet away. For us, we just put a fire pit in our backyard and we'll invite neighbors to come over and just hang out with us. My wife hosts a Bible study in our backyard around our fireplace all summer, and it's a little book study, and she'll invite some people from our church group. She'll invite some people from the neighborhood.
Very
and that's
cool.
just a great way to invite people who aren't believers into a community and relationship with each other. And then, of course, our kids are just friends with, all the other kids in the neighborhood. And when our kids go to, our church programming, we have an Awana program on Wednesday nights. It's pretty easy to invite those kids to that programming, and it just allows those families to then intersect our church. So for us, it's just about being part of a neighborhood and a community where we get to know people, and we can share our faith and invite them into things, even if they're maybe not ready to cross the threshold of the church. We can invite them and kind of bring that gospel to them, through our presence in the neighborhood.
Yeah, that is super, super cool. Just to start, it's, step one isn't through the doors of the church. It might be to the gate to your backyard.
Right.
To begin that conversation. How have you seen that play? I know it's interesting because, Andrew, your wife was just telling me a story recently of where she was in the backyard with your kids and your neighbor behind you, who you didn't know at
We've
the
met
time,
a handful of times.
comes over. He has 2 grandkids who are similar in age, and asked if they can come over and play with your kids, and he disappeared for 2 hours.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. It's our neighbor, and it's his daughter,
who passed away, right?
So it was technically his granddaughter, and so his daughter was the mother, but his daughter passed away, so they've adopted the granddaughter, and so she calls him dad and mom, and he's like, 55, retired, and now raising a 4-year-old, 4 or 5-year-old, and kind of one of the things that we've had a lot of interactions, but just kind of the passing, like, oh, we're doing a fire and he's dropped off firewood, or I've shoveled the front of his driveway, or like just very like
cool.
passing conversations. And literally one day she was like standing at the tree line, and I think she was kind of barking like a dog and just kind of like running around.
His granddaughter was?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Liam, my son, was kind of almost like barking back, and like they were like interacting like this, like 4-year-olds do. And all of a sudden he walked across with her and kind of introduced himself. I met him a couple of times, but introduced himself to Nicole, and they kind of talked for a moment. He's like, hey, are you okay if they play together? And she's like, yeah, that's fine. I'm just hanging out. And so she sat outside, and he kind of walked back across the tree line, and we didn't see him for an hour or two, and he had come back over, and we got a chance just to kind of sit, and by then came out and he kind of shared his story. And it's just one of those things where you realize, like, I think you use that term island unto yourself, and like it's how easy like the home can be such a sanctuary for us.
Yep.
And that's a really normal thing, but there's something really special when you do open your home to others and just open that space. There's a vulnerability there that is a really beautiful thing when you lean into it. And that's really what it was. It wasn't an inconvenience. We were outside anyways.
Yeah.
And just to have that interaction, and then just to, again, have that conversation with him afterwards of just, he kind of knew what we do and where we're at. And I think that's why he might have felt safe. But just to say, hey, let us know if you ever need anything, right? The first conversation wasn't the Jesus conversation.
Right.
The first conversation is, I just want to know who you are.
Right.
And there's, it's really special when it happens that way.
And I think that is so much the Jesus model we see throughout Scripture, throughout his time on the earth, was so much more of that organic relationship, love and know the person where they are. And I just love that idea because I've lived in both types of neighborhoods. I've lived in neighborhoods where the houses are further apart. Like, currently right now, the houses aren't right on top of me. We have, space. But I've lived in other places where it was. And even there, I remember we had a neighbor 2 houses to our right that for the 5 or 6 years we lived there, I never saw them. Their garage door would open. They would pull out, go to work. They would pull in and shut the garage door before they ever even got out of their car. So, they completely isolated themselves away. And it was such a curiosity to my wife and I. I think I told the story on a Sunday morning one time, so much so that after several years, we noticed that they had these pink balloons on their mailbox. And apparently they had a baby. Like, I didn't even know there were 2 of them in there, but apparently they had a baby. And so my wife's like, well, we're taking them a meal. I'm like, all right, let's do it. And I just remember knocking on their door, and the lady comes to the door and opens it, and we're like, well, we're Chris and Dory. We're 2 houses over and lived here for over 5 years, and nice to meet you. We brought you a meal. And she was so, sadly, I think she was mistrusting of it. Mm-hmm. It was so foreign to her that a neighbor would come and do something like that. Like she didn't trust it. In fact, it took us several attempts to get her to take the casserole dish. It's like, listen, it's just poppy seed chicken. It's not poisoned. I promise. It's just, and I don't even know if they ate it. I couldn't even speak to that. But it was just, I think, a very visual reminder to me of how our society tends to function. Is that we want to come in and close our garage door, and Christians are just as bad. I could be just as bad. I could easily be the garage door neighbor if I allow myself, because I'm tired when I get home. And I don't want to be bothered by your nonsense or your barking dog or your kids. I could become the grumpy old, grouchy old man. But, man, if we flip it around, and one thing I love about your stories, Andy, from career with family to even where you live, is just it seems to be there's this really beautiful theme of intentionality. And I just think that's such a cool way that you and your wife seem to have been very intentional and continue to be so.
Yeah, as we've joked about before, God has seen the path before us, and He's really put things in front of us at the perfect time. And so, yeah, it's really His story that we're trying to follow what He's calling us to do. And so, yeah, for us, we just feel like this is the place, both career-wise and where our family is located, that God has called us to be right now. One of the unique things is in this neighborhood that we live in that has house right next to each other, 15 feet in a row. We just happen to have a property that has an empty lot next to it that we own. Wow. And so it's got a fenced-in yard. It's the only yard anywhere in our whole neighborhood. And so that's, of course, where the kids come to play, because it's the only place to run around. And so for us, it's just a perfect place. We want all the neighborhood kids coming to our house to play, because we have a yard and we have a swing set and a sandbox, so cool. And we can play soccer in our yard. And the other lots are just too small for that. So God has just given us this property as a way to say, I want you to invite in the people from your neighborhood. We have a woman who lives behind us. She's totally shut in. She's physically severely handicapped, and she's pretty isolated and very, very far from God. And I don't think that she landed at that house by accident. Wow. We're almost the only neighbors that talk to her. Wow. And I think if we weren't there, I don't think she would ever talk to anybody. She would just stay in her house and kind of suffer alone. So, yeah, we look at the people around us as people that God has placed next to us on purpose, and we are to be a neighbor to them. And so, yeah, that's the calling that God has on our family in this season.
I love that. I love that. I attended a funeral yesterday of a amazing man, Jim Aker, died at 82. He just a saint of believers, just an incredible individual. And it's interesting because as the family shared yesterday at the service, so much of their memories had some similar ring to it. They remember that Sunday afternoons was time in the backyard around the fire pit with family, but they would always invite somebody else. They would always invite a family that maybe just needed some time or needed. So they were intentional. They were always looking for those opportunities and inviting them to that fire pit. So much so that on the drive home, my oldest son was driving with me, and we were just talking about it. I just really felt convicted, like, okay, this summer, I need to be more intentional with my fire pit. Like, God's given me a backyard. He's given me a fire pit. It might not be the biggest yard or the best fire pit, but I got it. Yep. And so I think that that's maybe a great message for all of us listening, is that we easily can find ourselves focusing so much on what I don't have, what others do and I didn't get, or why it's unfair, or even focusing, getting self-absorbed. I'm tired. I just want to go chill, whatever. What if this were a summer? We're coming into summer, I think, eventually, right?
We'll get there.
We'll get there. Anyway, what if this were a summer of intentionality for all of us, especially with our neighbors? Man, what if we just did that? I don't know if you guys feel this or not. Oddly enough, there are things I look back on in regards to COVID that I'm like, I kind of miss it. In the moment, we were too freaked out to enjoy it, but I kind of miss going for walks in our neighborhood. We got to know so many more of our neighbors during COVID because that's the only place we were legally allowed to have conversations without, the government coming in and raiding our home or something. But we were intentional with that. I missed the fact that we never put our pots and pans away because we were cooking 3 meals a day. So it's like, why? Let's just leave them out. I miss the fact that myself and my kids, I think we must have played well over 1,000 games of Mario Kart because we had nothing else to do, but it was just being there hanging, right? But the neighbor time, we made that a priority. And now how quickly are we? 4 years afterwards, how many of us have gone right back into that hurry rut? We come in, we shut the garage door, we're done. So what if we're intentional this year? I don't know.
Yeah, one of the things that my wife found for our family, especially for our 3 kids, is she has a poster that's called 1,000 Hours Outdoors. And the goal is to get our kids to be outside for 1,000 hours, during the course of the year. I think she had read somewhere, there's some group organization that's called 1,000 Hours Outdoors, and it was based on the fact that the average kid watches like 1,000 hours of TV a year.
Wow.
And so it was, how can we get that time outdoor? And for us, again, being in our neighborhood, when our kids are outside, when they're out the door, they're seeing other kids. They have an opportunity to play with other kids and invite other kids. Whereas if they were just inside, watching TV or playing video games or whatever, they're not going to run into those other kids. So that has just made our yard is always the place where kids are hanging out. If there's kids out in the neighborhood, they'll come to our yard. So that's just something that we've committed to for our family, is get outside, because you're not going to run into your neighbors in your kitchen. You're going to run into them when you're outside. So when we're playing basketball in the driveway or whatever it is,
love that.
You'll have a chance to see your neighbors.
Or if you do run into them in your kitchen, something's up.
Something's up. That's good.
Man, that is so good. That really is. And it's such perfect timing. One, with the time of year we're coming into. It's funny because just a couple weeks ago, we were talking about, we're going through as a church the life of Paul, going through the book of Acts. And we were at that moment where Paul was beginning his first missionary journey. But one of the first places they sent was Barnabas, the home of Barnabas, the home city. And it's like, so, for many of us, we think of missions as somewhere far away, exotic, long distance. The mission field starts in your backyard.
Absolutely.
The mission field is your neighbor across the street, that weird guy that nobody sees, or that family that is always causing ruckus, or I don't care who it is, but it's our neighbors. They're there. Our mission field is literally out our door. And all we have to do is see it, watch for the opportunities, be intentional, and build a fire.
Yeah.
That's right.
Good. Andy, man, thank you. This was fantastic. So thank you so much for taking time to be with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me here.
So it really was a joy. We'll have to get you back on and keep hearing how the summer goes. We'll have to have maybe a post-summer fire pit check-in or something.
That sounds great.
That was the fire pit.
We all have fire pits. We'll see how we do with that.
Yeah.
So, hey, thank you so much, listeners, for being with us. We really do appreciate this time with each and every week. If you have not done so, click that subscribe button somewhere on the screen, whatever platform you're on. That way you never miss an episode of the Bayview Podcast, because we really do look forward to this time with you each and every week. For this week, this is Andy, Andrew, and Chris signing off. Appreciate you being with us, and we'll see you next time around.